Okay, so this is a quick run through of the study guide for our final exam, which will be on Friday. A couple points up front. Final exam is going to be comprehensive, touch upon all of the different topics we've had over the term. Obviously, we're going to probably do more emphasis on some of the things we did later, in particular database and the relational model and things like that, since that was actually since exam three. But we will see. You should expect to see some questions from earlier in the term. All right. Structure of the exam is going to be the same. 30 questions, multiple choice, true, false, some combination thereof, and two problems. The problems for this particular exam are going to be from Chapter 7 and Chapter 8, and probably the best way to prepare for those would be to actually do the problems from Chapter 7 and Chapter 7 and 8, because those will be kind of the same concepts and the same functionality we'll be working with. I'm going to actually do a quick, on this video, I'll walk through some of the problems of 7, 8, get, chance to kind of work our way through it. All right. So the first area you want to review is the material we did on databases. All right. So, the first thing, first and foremost, we want to know that, you want to be able to know what the difference between a database and a spreadsheet is. The difference is the rules associated with it, the fact that we do design work up front with database, with the definition of a database as opposed to a spreadsheet, which is, we can be very fast and very flexible. Um, so that's really kind of the main difference. The scalability, I think, also is a factor. So the scalability of a database, we can do things in the millions of records. Spreadsheets, I mean, you we've some degree of scalability on it, but I mean, historically, I think it works with records size, a couple thousand. All right. All right, the elements of a database hierarchy, the database table, um, record, field. All right, that's our, the four that come down. We talked about the definition of that database, the difference between a database and a relational database. So a database is a repository of data that we can load data into and extract data from and update data. A relational database is a database that is implemented using Dr. Codd's rules. All right. A couple things about Codd's rules. His integrity requirements, entity, data, referential. You want to know what they are. So entity is every row must have a unique key of some type. Data integrity deals with the rules, the enforcement of data rules, um, for all of the fields in the records. And then referential integrity deals with two tables. The idea you have two tables in a common field, and that the common field is referenced in both tables. Right. Um, Also, the relationships in the relational database. One to one versus many to one, or one to many, depending upon which way you want to go, or many to many. Those are the three types. Um, Also, we talked about Codd's normal form. The different types of forms. There's five. There's five of them, and really 4 and 5 are the most important. Um, the different types of SQL queries. So, data definition language versus data manipulation language versus transaction control language versus security control or access control. Query selection criteria. Looking at the grid, the QBE, the query by example grid, ands and ors, and also joins. What is a join, and how does a join, what is a join, how does it operate, or how does it function? Common fields. Fields are joined on two tables are joined together on a common field. If you don't have a common field, you can't join the two tables together. Um, Take a look at the data cleansing functionality in Chapter 9. We talk about that in Excel. So things like was it column, table to column, or column to row, and some of the text functions which we can use to manipulate and carve data out, so we can create strings of, we can create content of a, we can take a string of data and then carve out data from it, carve out pieces of the data, and create a new string out of it, right? Substrings. So when we do left, left will be, we start processing a string from the left. Right, we come from the left to right, right to left, and then something like length, and len is the length. It'll tell us what the length of the field is. We can use that programmatically. If we get the length of it, then we can kind of figure out, by using these functions, we can kind of maneuver our way. We have the ability to maneuver our way through a string of characters and extract it. I want to go back, take a look at the where we talked about the functionality of Excel tables, pivot charts. That's all from chapter 6. The different way Excel worksheets can be grouped together and consolidated. So, we talked about worksheet grouping, as well as three-dimensional formulas, 3D formulas, that we can access data across multiple sheets. Make sure you take a look at I believe we talked about this in chapter 10, the different types of analytics tools and kind of what they can be used for. So we talk about the scenario manager, which is kind of a what if is really designed to be a what if analysis. We create a model and we say, what if we do this, or what if we do that, changing variables, and seeing what the outcome is. Solver is another analysis tool, but it actually will give us the ability to identify an optimal answer for a particular situation based upon the variables and also the limits by constraints. All right, so this is a pretty common business problem. What is the maximum output we can generate, with these capacities and these constraints. All right, and then also the break-even analysis, where we're trying to, where we will try to figure out how to, where the revenue stream is equal to our cost stream. All right, at what point do we break even? You want to know what an Excel template is. Where would it be evaluated? How do you create a template? You do a save as template. Also the macros, around the programming side of things, making sure that we can, if you're in Excel and you need to create you want to record a macro, you have to turn on we have to turn on our developer tab in the ribbon, and that's done through that is done through the preferences on the machine. This is a Mac, but you have a similar on the PC. If you enable that, if we go to our preferences and our ribbon, and if we look down here, by default that is unclicked. If we click it, the developer tab will magically appear at the top of our screen here. All right. Also the potential security risks in macros associated with macros. The fact that if we have secure, that if someone was to gain control of a macro-enabled worksheet, that could be used as a means of being able to gain access to a machine and control a machine. Talked about named ranges and how can we use a named range in a formula. The idea is we take a range of cells and we give it a name, and then we can use that name in a formula. Otherwise, what we have to do is we have to define the range. We have to put the range in, so it'd be like A1 or $1, $1 colon G or $G $9. All right, so that would be a range. That would be a range of in a table that we if it was in a worksheet. Or, as I said, we could take that same range and create it, give it a name, and then reference that name. Take a look at the different functions, the statistical functions. So it's the min, max, average, and sum, and how they are used to identify data in a column. All right. Also, look at the functionality of the advanced filtering and slicers, and know that slicers are really um, leveraging and adapting the filtering functionality that's built into Excel. The difference between the H lookup and a V lookup, and how we would invoke that. So if we gave you, kind of an instruction, like an H lookup command or a V lookup command, what would that, what does that command mean? If you see a particular implement, invocation of that. The different types of charts we can create within Excel. So we had looked at that. Go back and take a look at that. And also look at the different types of functions, all right, the different categories of functions. So the big categories, text, statistical, math, lookup and reference. Lookup and reference, this is where we have the V lookup, H lookup, and other index, match, all of those. Just kind of know what those are. Our logical functions, those are the if, and, or, all those. Financial, and then date and time. Just want to kind of know what those are. All right. And probably the other thing you want to do is go back and do a review of the terms. Okay. So, for each, I think through chapters, up through, from the start to 8, I think 2 to 8, there was a set of terms that we had put out into the module. So go back and take a look at that, understand kind of what they are, what some of the definitions are, some of these things. Okay. So 7 and 8. So let's take a quick look at 7 and 8. All right. So 7 and 8. If we look at it from the book. All right, so 7 deals with the creation of multiple worksheets and workbooks. All right, so problem solve 1, which is the problem we were working with. It's the parks problem. All right, so we have the parks worksheet. So what there is a series of steps we go through here around the around grouping data together and working with it. So we'll go, say, for example, in the parks. Here we go. So we go and take a look at the parks table here. Okay. What we get up front, what we are given is kind of an open, we have 4 quarters and a summary and a link summary, right? And then we also have the rates, right? And the way where the questions work, or what we do with the questions are, we're going to create we're going to add some additional columns onto this to give us what the dollars are. So so these are the rates, and then for each quarter we have the count of how many people we have on a quarter by quarter basis. So what we want to do, one of the things we want to do is apply the same formulas to quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so we could do it by hand, do it on each one, or what we could do is by using a command click. I'm on the Mac, but I think control click on a PC. We select these 4. We can select the 4 tabs, all right, of the worksheet. Now, anything I do to this one worksheet will be automatically done to the other 4. All right. So in this case, what we will do is we want to say we want to multiply B6, all right, which is our the adults times the rate, which is, if we look at the rates table, that's also B6 on that table, coincidentally. So what we would want to do is that we could actually convert this into we could do a V lookup, a couple different ways to do it. The easiest way to do it, since we know where it's at, all right, what we can do is we can just simply go back and say, we can reference that cell, on the by the worksheet name. All right. So the way we would play this out then would be, this would be, an equal B6 times, sorry about that, times, and that would be rates, exclamation point. It always helps to spell it correctly. Exclamation point to end the name, and then it would be B6. And you can see now I have that, I've created that formula. And now since I have that formula, what I can do is I can simply copy that, or drag across horizontally, a little wider. And then we can also grab these two and then drag that down. And we also want to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's how, so this is, and what I'm doing is when these are all linked together, see, I just did it to 1. All right, but if I had linked it together, I should probably demonstrate that. Actually, what I'll do, let me do the next one. I'll do Q2. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to link Q2, Q3, Q4. All right, and what I will do here is I'm going to make this equal B6 times RATES, exclamation point, B6. All right, and then I will move this across. I will move it down. We'll kind of expand the size of the fields to accommodate it. All right, and because these were tied together, because all of these were grouped together, and I can ungroup them, I just right click and say ungroup the sheets. If I go to 3 and I go to 4, those are populated as well now, right, with that data. All right, and then I think I have to format them as currency, but anyway. Okay, so that is the linking. So that's basically the linking of the cells together. We have a summary. So the other thing they ask to do is, okay, we need to create a summary of all these values together. All right. So in this case, what we're going to do is leverage what we call a 3D formula. All right. So what a 3D formula is, we're going to access the same data across all these sheets. All right. So what we'll do is we will do in here we will do equals sum equals SUM, and then it will be, we'll do the quarter, so we'll do quarter one, one, two, quarter four, four, quarter four, and this cell, so that's going to be, is that B5? See if it does that. No, not quite. All right, hang on. So sum quarter one, quarter four. I'm missing something on this. Hang on. So the 3D formula, sum quarter one, quarter four, at, oh, C6. Sorry, I had the wrong, or B6. All right, and then what we would do is we would copy that. So this would be sum quarter one to quarter four, B6, and what that'll do is that will go to every B6 across these four worksheets and sum them up into here. And then we can take this cell, take this formula, drag it across, drag it down, and we have our numbers. All right, so that is that. The link summary we did, if you recall, what the way the link summary works is this actually uses the consolidate function. So that is on the data. We find this on the data tab. All right, and the consolidate function. If I click that, what we'll see is, and what we can do is we can consolidate data from different worksheets, different workbooks, different formats, so they don't actually have to look exactly the same. All right. But what we do is we give it what the function is. We, in this case, we're going to do a sum, but we can do any of these statistical calculations. The reference becomes the range of what we want to summarize from each one of these tables. So in this case, we want to go to quarter one. We'll go to quarter one, A5 through E11. If we create A5 to E11, if we make that a named range, we can put the range name in there too. But otherwise, if we don't have a name range, if we don't have a name for it, we will put the cell range we want to pull it from. This is the way this works is this will actually, the address it shows is the basically where it's at on the system. So this is the drive. All right, the folder on the drive. Yep. And that is maintained on the file name is actually the file name. So this is all directory stuff. This is the file name. The file name is always in brackets, square brackets. The worksheet name is always ended with a exclamation point, and then whatever the cell address is. All right. So this gives you an idea of what this, so we define these. What we do is we'll pick a spot on the worksheet where to put it. And then what we will do is you select the range off the four worksheets. Each one, so if I do a plus, hang on a sec. The way we enter it, we actually put it into the reference and then do a plus. All right. And then things you want to do, you want to click the create links to the source data, and also use the labels in the row and the column. All right. And then when we close this, what it will do is it will execute. It will go to those four. It will execute whatever is in those formulas, those four formulas, and summarize it all in one worksheet. Okay. So what you'll see is when it first comes up, it'll actually look more like this. All right. So it'll give you the sum of everything. Okay, and then what you have the option of doing is we can blow this out, and we can get the detail. All right, for each one, where this is coming from. All right, so that's the mechanisms. That's the things you want to kind of take a look at and play with a little bit for the for problem 7. Is problem 8 deals with the programming functionality. So remember what we had talked about with Excel. What Microsoft has added to Excel over the years is functionality that lets us kind of leverage Excel as an application. We can develop an application using Excel, and there's certain things we'll want to do. You need to be able to debug like functions and formulas. So there's in that case, what we have is we will have one of the formulas, the trace precedence. So the way the trace precedence work, if I go to a particular cell with a formula in it, and I do trace precedence, what it'll do is it'll show me everything that makes that up. So in this case, this is a sum of everything in this column. So that's why I have the whole. I'll see the thing. Tracing dependence will be anything we go forward. We don't have any formulas we don't have any dependent formulas on this. All right. And then we can remove the arrow. So if I trace precedence, I want to remove it. I click the remove arrow. All right. There's a function that they talk about in the problem around using the let's see. Make sure I get this right. It asks us to use the trace precedence. It'll use the watch window. One of the things about the watch window is it only runs under Windows or Excel for Windows. It doesn't run for Excel for Mac. All right, but if we had that, you would see that. Usually, we would see that in kind of the same area we have the precedence. And what you do is you fire it up, and then you enter what cells you want to watch, and then as you're executing a formula, you can see how the values in the cells will change as time goes on, as you execute from step to step to step. Remember, when we have a formula, it starts with the lowest, the most innermost function, and works our way back out to the outside. All right, so use the example. If we do a VLOOKUP and we surround it with an if error. All right, so we'll say, okay, well, I want to do a VLOOKUP, and if I have an error, I want it to do a certain thing. What will happen is it'll read as if error, then the VLOOKUP, and the way it'll execute, it'll do the VLOOKUP, and then pass the results of whatever we did back to the if error, which will then evaluate and then do its own, and then execute on its own. All right. So that's the functionality. Those are some of the things I think we do within this thing. The other thing we talk about in this is what we call circular references. All right, so a circular reference is a situation where a cell has a formula that references itself. All right, so the way a circular reference would work. Right now, this is a sum D9 at D35. And this is column D36. If I make this a D36, all right, it pops up, it detects that right away. There are one or more circular references. It doesn't stop us from doing it. but it does alert us to it. And then what it'll do, if we have a circular reference, at the bottom of the screen, we will see a message here that circular references are on this sheet. And it'll tell us what cell it is. So it's in D36. And you say, okay, I've got a reference in cell D36 to D36. I make it D35. And we're okay, and it goes away. If I create multiples, if I have multiple circular references, what it'll do is it'll show the messages. Actually, if we look at it again, there are one or more circular references. So whenever it detects the circular reference, that it's a plural, it's one or many. So I can create one here. I can create one here. All right, and what it'll do is it'll find the last one we created, and then if we come back in and we get rid of them, okay, now it's back. Now we've eliminated the circular reference. That's what the circular reference is talking about. All right. So we talked about. So the other thing to look at around this, you want to take a look at, is the data validation. So if you recall, what data validation is it's on the data tab, and what it is, it's a rule generator. All right, very nice little tool, data validation, a rule generator that lets us create a rule for any value that we can check for any cell. So this is done on a cell by cell basis. We apply the rule. So the idea would be, okay, if I'm going to if part of the processing of this program is to have the user enter something in, what we can do is we can control what they enter or validate what they enter. So if we need a date and they put ABC, if we just let that go in and feed it into a formula that would that would process the date, it would blow up. All right, it would stop. So what we can do is we can say up front that, okay, for this particular cell, we're going to put a date. All right, and you can say what a date range would be. All right, or I can say date equal to or not equal to, greater than, less than, all of these criterias. All right, start date, end date. All right, and then what I can do is I can have what we say the input message. So the input message will be, let me go back up here, any value. Default is any value, because remember, in a spreadsheet, by default, you can come in, you can just enter anything because all the fields are set to be general. All right, so this will let anything come in. If I start setting a rules, then it'll match it against the rule set. All right, the input message gives us a message, so when somebody selects the cell, it will pop up on the screen and give them information. Okay, we want you to enter this. Error alert gives us the ability, it tells us what we want to do if an error condition is detected. So if we want to make sure nobody does, if you don't enter a date, we don't want this thing to execute, you can say stop. All right, and that'll pop up a message, and it'll say your error message will be, enter the right name, or enter the right date, or we're not going anywhere. We also have a warning, which is, kind of alerts the user that something's going on, but it doesn't stop them. All right, so stop will not let you proceed. Warning will let you proceed. And then finally, the third one is information. If we detect a certain condition, we can, create a message that would communicate back to the users about that. Okay. One last thing around the settings. we have a list function. The way the list function works is we create a range of cells in a worksheet somewhere. Right? It could be on this worksheet, could be on another worksheet. If it's on another worksheet, we give it a, we qualify it. We'll say, if it's on list data, we would put list data exclamation point and whatever the cells are, the range of cells. And what it'll do is it'll use that list. It'll take whatever's in the data that's in those in that range of cells, and it will create a selection for the user. So what'll happen is if I go to a particular field and I only want to restrict somebody to, you only want to be able to enter, this, A, B, or C. I can create a list. I can put A, B, and C in these cells. Say this is what the address is, and then when I click this, when they go to the cell, they'll see either A, B, or C. All right, so it's pretty slick. All right, and then the last thing we have, the last type of function we have, validation function, is custom. All right, and custom is we can enter any kind of formula or function in here to validate the field. All right, so the idea of the data validation is, at its heart is simple, simple validation rules. But you can come in and do a much more sophisticated validation rule depending upon what what your requirements are. All right, so the next thing we have within this problem, as it's explained, is we need to record a macro. All right. So like I said, the first thing you got to do if you're in a worksheet, you need the macro recorder comes off of the developer tab. That's how we invoke it. All right. So you have to make sure that the setting on your workbook, is set so the developer shows up on the ribbon. All right. Once you have that, to record a macro is pretty simple. It's really a matter of first you go to the developer tab. All right, you click record macro, and what will happen is it will, when I click it, it will ask me what do I want to call the macro, where do I want to store it at, and how do I want to start it. So in this case, it would be the shortcut key would be option, command, and whatever letter we want to create for that, and then we can put a description about what it does as well. All right. So when I create that, when I execute, and then what will happen is, as it's running, anything I type. So we'll do a real simple one here. So we'll say macro 3. I'll say it's D as in date. All right, real simple. If I do an OK, what you'll see is I'm recording the macro. It says stop recording. That's how I'm adding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple dates in here. Okay, so I've put a couple dates in here. All right, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop recording. All right, so the macro is now recorded. So what I can do is, and how I know I have a recorded macro is a couple different ways I can invoke it. I had the command line, which would be Control Option. I think I have it for D as in date. Was it? Hang on. No, maybe it wasn't date. Macro 3. Control Shift. Oh, it's Control Shift. Sorry about that. Control Shift D. So if you ever find yourself on the Visual Basic screen, this is the programming language that sits inside of Excel. You just close the window and you're out of it. So it says Control Shift. So Control Shift D. That's what it did. It triggered it. So you'll see I created 3 dates. So what it is, I created the macro. I can also take a button. I can also put a button on a screen, and I can say, add the macro to that. All right, and then I can take these out. All right, it could be down here. If I click this button, it puts the date, so it runs the macro. So that's basically the macro. That's the macro functionality of how you record it. The tricky thing is you have to you get to the macro recorder on the developer tab only. That's how we get to it. And then once we create a macro, we can either get to it from the command line, we can get to it from either a command line, or we can get it from we create a button control and assign the macro to it when we click it. The other thing we talk about in this problem is creating like a link, like a hyperlink. All right, so hyperlinks are done on a per cell basis. So I have a hyperlink here on the edit lists. All right, so if I edit the hyperlink, what it will do is it will take me to, I said, in this document, go to list data, cell A1. That's how we would read that. If I do an OK on that, if I click this, I'll go to A1. Go back to our list data again. Oh, not quite. Go back to our budget data. That just goes. That'll just take me to anywhere in the workbook I want to do it. So I can enable the data on the. I can enable, the data on the screen to be and you'll see it it'll show up as as a hot link. If I hover over it, it'll tell me where it goes. Now, what'll happen is if you, the thing that gets a little tricky is if you have a hot link in it, if you just click it once, it'll follow the link. If you click and hold, now you can edit the field. All right, so that's one of those little things to be aware of on this. And I think it's everything associated with the problems 7 and 8. Let's take a quick look just to be sure. Macro, yep, that was it. Okay, so if you go through, like I said, the problems that will be on the exam will be from 7 and 8. They'll be of this style. So if you go through this a couple times and just got to get be comfortable with the the functionality, kind of the functions and whatnot of this, you should do just fine. Okay. Any problems? Give me a yell. Send me an email. I'll be checking things, and we'll see you on Friday. Take care now.